Our next guest, Colin Wright, is a former evolutionary biologist and currently an editor at Quillette magazine, as well as writing for the Wall Street Journal, where his headlines give us a bit of a clue as to his areas of expertise and interests, such as J.K. Rowling is right, sex is real and it is not a spectrum, the dangerous denial of sex, and no one is born in the wrong body. Colin also has plenty to say about the dangerous new practice of cancel culture. Colin, welcome to Outsiders. Great to have you on.
Hey, thanks for having me. I appreciate it.
Well, Colin, you wrote that in most cases, counselling can help gender dysphoric adolescents resolve any trauma or thought processes that have caused them to desire an opposite-sexed body. Yet currently, various states here in Australia are seeking to make such counselling criminal. Is there really such a thing as being trapped in the wrong body, in your opinion?
No, so I think that's sort of this Descartesian idea of the mind and body are sort of separate from each other's, and then you can have male and female brains floating separately that can somehow land in a body that's not right for them. That's just not sort of the way that biology works. We can speak of brains that are more masculinized or feminized, but we can't talk about the brains of literal males ending up in the brains of literal female bodies or vice versa.
Rita?
Now, I'm interested in this anti-scientific trend in science, where essentially they're denying the existence of biological sex and arguing because a very tiny percentage of people are into sex, then biological sex is not real. It's just a wide spectrum. Can you just take us through that thinking?
Yes, a lot of the confusion seems to be coming about by confusing what are secondary sexual characteristics, which are the traits that we get as we go through puberty that are triggered by different hormones, such as breasts and body hair, facial hair for males. These are sort of traits that can differ between males and females that do sort of fall on a spectrum, although they're very clustered around males and females. But this is very different from the actual fact of whether or not you're a male or a female. Which is a binary category that we have in humans and other sexually reproducing species. So it's basically this conflation of your primary sex, which is based on the types of gonads you have and whether you're creating eggs or sperm, and then the secondary traits that you gain during puberty, which are related to sex but are not really the definition of an individual's biological sex.
James?
One of the things I've been really interested in, Colin, is this idea that in schools there will be these clusters where suddenly you'll have a small number and then a much larger number of kids claiming some sort of gender dysphoria. And the idea being that perhaps this is being reinforced by peer pressure or by counselors or some combination of both, and it becomes kind of a thing in a particular school community. But since the coronavirus pandemic lockdowns and the shutting of physical schools, I have heard several reports that a lot of these claims to have been transgender have suddenly sort of fallen by the wayside, and that these have resolved themselves more or less naturally. Would you say that this sort of thing would be evidence for the idea that at least some of the transgenderism we're seeing in schools is part of a suggestibility that's caused either by peers, counselors, or both?
I think that's definitely a possibility that needs to be explored. And one of the saddest things about this whole debate is that a lot of activists on the gender ideology are trying to remove the idea that social influences could be a thing. They're trying to take that off the table of debate, and they're really doubling down on this idea that it is only increased acceptance. The public is more accepting of trans identities, and that's what they say is the cause for this rise in the number of gender dysphoric individuals. However, this doesn't really make sense when you look at the data, because suicide rates are sort of on the rise, and if society was being more accepting, we would actually expect these to be dramatically falling in this category of individuals. So the data don't seem to support that. I think we should just be looking at all potential causes, because you don't see a 4,000% rise in people claiming gender dysphoria just over the last 10 years without something else going on, something that's not quite business as usual with regard to gender dysphoria.
Colin, you've written about how it's perfectly normal for for girls to behave in a more boyish, tomboyish manner when they're younger, for boys to be more effeminate. And explain to us your thinking about just because the kid puts on a dress doesn't mean he wants to be a girl. Talk us through that.
Yeah, I mean, we've always been sort of a culture that is favorable to gender nonconforming individuals. We know that things like prenatal hormones can determine whether or not someone is more masculinized and feminized in many traits. So you can have female children, girls who are tomboyish and who might behave in more masculine ways, might have more affinity towards certain toys or personality traits that we more associate with males, and males can be more effeminate as well. These are things that should just be accepted as people expressing themselves as individuals. What we see now is this sort of this inversion where people are saying, oh, you have the traits that are stereotypical of one sex, therefore maybe you've been trapped in the wrong body, maybe you're actually trans, rather than us just expanding our notions of what acceptable behavior is for girls and boys and men and women. We're trying to put them in boxes and saying that maybe you've been born in the wrong body instead if you are behaving not according to these like ideal notions of masculinity or femininity.
Rita.
So it's basically going backward, isn't it? We're supposed to be progressing, but we're going back to these 1950s, 40s notions of what it is acceptable to be female or male. What I'm interested about is I saw a discussion online between evolutionary biologists, and you were a part of it, about woke culture dismantling childhood innocence. Can you tell us the theory behind that and why some believe that woke folk want to dismantle the innocence of children?
So I don't know if I can talk too much about why that is. I do remember that conversation, but we do see sort of this rise in exposing children to just very adult, very sexually suggestive scenarios. We've seen videos of trans story hour or drag queen story hour in children's schools. There's videos of children being like basically having a lap dance by these individuals who are in front of them and being cheered on by adults. This is just wildly inappropriate behavior, but you do tend to see this happening more and more, and I think that should definitely be very concerning for us all.